Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for our, was it Brian, 46th webinar in the AIEC Webinar Week series. Today is our final series, or our final day of our third series. So thank you so much for everyone who has been part of this. When we started in November, we weren't really sure how it would go. So we consider it to be a great success. We really appreciate everyone's support and for tuning in for these things. Real quick housekeeping. We're going to have Futura doing from customer request to as built, no paper needed, the digital advantage of paperless processes. This presentation will last about 45 minutes, leaving time at the end for Q&As. If you do have any questions, please submit those through the chat function as a private message to the AIEC, and Brian or myself will be happy to moderate those to David. Please keep your microphones muted unless asked otherwise. And with that, I'll turn it over.
All right, thanks, Ashley. Just a reminder, this session does qualify for PDHs for our professional engineers. So I hope to get those out later this week, all the certificates and everything for all the sessions you attended. Once we've checked the Zoom logs and everything to make sure everybody had actually logged in and everything. So watch for those emails later this week. Our presenter today is David Shaw. He's the Business Development Manager at Futura Systems. He's been working in the electric co-op industry for over a decade, primarily with field solutions. He attended the University of Georgia and is currently living in Athens, Georgia. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, David.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to attend. Hope to give you a piece of education here and sort of give you some insight into one of our customers is doing to sort of change that paperless process and really get into the digital world. And I'll go through a lot of the reasons of why that is in the presentation. Real briefly here at the beginning, I'm going to sort of describe what we do here at Futura. So I'm the Business Development Manager from Futura, and we are a full E&O solution. So we do GIS. We're very GIS Esri centric. We do staking, we do OMS, we do service orders and workflow. We do Indigo inspections, and we'll be seeing various pieces of that through this actual presentation I'm going through today. But that said, that's sort of, I'm going to try to make that most of the end of my marketing piece here and describing that, because to me the highlight here is really showing what one of our utilities did and what they did as a process. And again, certainly Futura was part of that process, but ultimately what you all want to hear about is what one of your fellow cooperatives has done to resolve some issues at their utility. So that particular cooperative is Central Georgia EMC. I regret, unfortunately, they couldn't join us today, but they've put a great project together, and I certainly have been involved in various pieces of that and talked to them at length about that. So I'm going to do my very best to do justice to what the project that they put together. So first and foremost, a little bit about Central Georgia. So they're south of Atlanta. Sort of between Atlanta and Macon. You can see they're fairly good sized at over 60,000 meters. And again, as you can see in the map and in the miles of line, they've got a fairly big footprint as far as size goes as that. So certainly they've got a lot of process as far as that goes. They are growing, certainly being a suburb of Atlanta and between Atlanta and Macon, but their growth is certainly not extreme at this time. So that will sort of be reflected in some of the other numbers that I'm showing as well. This is just a look at their software platforms. You can see for CIS and general accounting, they're SEDC. Same with document entry. They're using Mobile Track for their warehouse management software. And then on the engineering and operations side, they of course are Futura Shop. So for GIS and staking and asset management and some of the other pieces that you'll see here, they are that. So it is worth noting, because I'm talking about some of these interfaces, that Futura, we are a subsidiary of SEDC. So obviously there's going to be some links there as far as data going back and forth, but we also do work with a wide variety of different accounting systems as well. So this I just wanted to show you is, again, this is the core of sort of what we're all talking about here. These are staked jobs. So we're talking about primarily, of course, new construction, but it could be anything that you're out there trying to get done in the field and really get to work. So wanted to show what Central Georgia is doing in a calendar year. So this is for 2020. You can sort of see the pattern of what that is as far as how many staked jobs they're doing. So this is, as you could tell, a pretty large section of what they're going to be doing. They do on the engineering and operations side. So addressing this project was very important because, again, the more efficient we can make this process, you're talking about a real return on investment as far as when you're moving forward and you know, getting this process as streamlined as possible. And to that end, we can sort of talk about the process. So first I wanted to start with what the current workflow is at Central Georgia. The first two here I think are important just because they're important in far as any workflow goes. Workflow should be work management driven. I mean, again, it is about moving. We're not creating this in a theoretical environment. This is not to, you know, work that is might be done. You know, this is work that has to be done. The requirements to keep the business going and to provide service to our customers day to day. So it's very important that that actually, you know, again, that we keep that at the core of what we're doing. And, you know, especially when you talk about something about moving online, moving to virtual, moving to paperless, you can't lose sight of the fact that you're talking about actual work. So you can't get super theoretical as opposed to what you do. You've got to make sure that it fits your actual process that you're doing day to day. In addition, it also has to be requirement driven. There are certain things that we, for practical reasons or for legal reasons, have to make sure to get done. However, the current workflow process that Central Georgia had in place was very paper dependent, and I'll address a lot of the disadvantages of it being paper dependent, you know, as we go forward. In addition, you know, paper staking sheets. This is the standard. I mean, all of you have probably experienced the pile of papers that is either in a folder or stapled together that is passed through your utility that represents that construction job. And that includes the staking sheets, but it also includes a variety of notes. I can remember implementing one in the past that there was a green sheet attached to it, and we spent a lot of time developing all the fields on that green sheet only to find out when we actually got to the utility that no one knew what the green sheet was for anymore because it had been a paper piece that had been added to the process by somebody in the past and had nobody was in use of it. So y'all are all familiar of sort of that excess of paper that can be passed around the process. And again, it is necessary, obviously not all of it, but certainly it is a necessary piece of it. And to that end, the construction schedule is built 5 days in advance at Central Georgia. And the move of all that paper and all that process is a barrier to that. If you're going to get things, you know, built and set out and planned, obviously making sure that, you know, stack of paper makes it to the right person so you can make that plan means that it all sort of has to come together in a particular thing, which again can add an additional delay to that particular piece. And then those as-built changes then have to be documented. And both the as-built, these next two, the as-built changes and the unit changes noting on the staking sheet, that's all those redlining. It's that, you know, literally the person getting that red pencil out and marking up that sheet and having that. But then all that's not only a matter of what needs to be noted in the field, but that data then has to get back to the office as well. Which again is another piece of that stack. Is not, you know, it's not like it's going out to the field and construction's happening and then you're done. That same stack of paper is progressing all the way back into the utility. It also, because it is sort of a single stack, it becomes requires updating for single department. So it's a very linear process, and I'll show you a little bit of this here later. In addition, it's also all manual, all done, you know, by a single technician. So that stack again goes to a single person who can then make those single edits. And then there were some additional things that were a little bit, maybe a little bit customer to Central Georgia, some processes that they had also already in place. So for instance, they had picture inventory management. So they were actually passing SD cards. So because part of the construction process was to update a variety of pictures and pass those back on into thing. And so that was a very manual process where literally, SD cards were taken out of cameras, they were put into computers, it was added to the GIS and those things. And then also they have a process where they're actually imaging all those documents. So all that big stack of documents at the end, somebody has to get in front of a scanner and actually go through and put each one of those pieces of paper through the scanner so they have some sort of digital permanent record. So as you can see, very practical, very much designed for the purpose it was, and we did get the process done. But because you're talking about almost 6,000 jobs a year, you can imagine this can be very burdensome as far as going through that process day in and day out. So we really wanted to, Central Georgia really wanted to, take that and sort of modernize that process. Just as one more look, I did want to show you. So this is the the workflow for that. I'm not obviously going to go through all the different pieces of that, but I mean, I just wanted to show you this because I wanted to, to say it's complicated. This is not something you just, I'm not doing a presentation about, hey, we created one form and it just solved our whole paper problem. It obviously, this is a large, complicated process for good reason. There's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of different departments, and you had to make sure that you're really, getting it defined correctly. Also, primarily it's linear. I understand, obviously, in this particular slide, it's not just because I had limited space, but this is pretty much, it's going to go from that stack of paper is going to go from one person to the next person to the next person. And it's going to be worked on one department or one person at a time till it sort of gets to the end. There's a couple of exceptions here, but they are fairly minor as far as the grand scheme of things. And then again, just to repeat, obviously it is going through multiple departments. This thing is encountering accounting, engineering, operations, GIS, again, a CSR. I mean, it could have every different piece of the utility could see, this process go through the whole thing. So it has to be treated effectively. It has to be, looked at, in a complete form, not just sort of, haphazardly put together. And then there is what's generated by this. Hopefully most of you are, well, I mean, I would hope most of you aren't necessarily having to be familiar with this sort of sheet, but as you can see, the printed boxes and all the diagrams and stuff for this particular job are there already. So there's a lot in a staking sheet, without all the redlining notes. And this is an actual staking sheet where somebody's actually going out and making those notes. So, I mean, as you can see, when you get out in the field, obviously the reality versus the theoretical, which was what I was talking about before as far as workflow goes, is not always the same. So you could take a sheet that has already got a massive amount of information on it, and then all of a sudden you could see you're writing in the margins and you're making those changes. And you can see I just got a list on the left here. I mean, you're talking about GPS inventory numbers. You've got to be as-built changes. What do we have to do to make this job work? All the recloser information are information on any different circuits. You've got, you've got ID numbers, you've got hole tags, anything there, and then any additional costs that are actually associated with that. I mean, this all doesn't come, all these notes, don't only cost time as far as notes themselves, but they cost money. I mean, you're doing things differently, so you have to account for that. And whether that's being charged to the customer or not, you need to make sure that's accounted for in your process and recorded accordingly. And then something else that was sort of an extra step as far as Central Georgia goes, and although I think valuable and important, may not apply to your particular utility, would be a picture inventory. So Central Georgia had a field inventory done over a decade ago by Chapel Mapping, and they did a wide variety of pictures. Usually there's somewhere between 5 and 8 pictures per location. And they want to keep that up to date. You're seeing some examples. I mean, those are 2 locations and the pictures associated with them with those individual locations. And because it was done early in their process as far as workflow and when they were designing all this, they've built a wide variety of workflows and different people. These are accessible by everyone in the organization. So they have become something that they rely on. So it becomes an important part of the process where it's just not a matter of, taking a picture is not just a single picture record. These are actively used throughout the utility. So incorporating and understanding that was an important piece of this. And this is, again, why you would go through a process that would pass an SD card through, in order to get these pictures, because these are valuable. This is something that a CSR expects to be able to find whenever they're looking at a poll. It's something that if you're in the office and you're planning what you're going to go out to do a job for joint use or for some sort of construction, you rely on being accurate. So making sure we're managing that. And again, if you've got this level of detail, I mean, I can see why you would want to protect this. Just like when you want to protect GIS data, this is just another form of data, and having these be accurate and current as part of your workflow process certainly is something you want to protect as part of the process as well. So what was the goal here? So this is the modern workflow. So this is what we're trying to get to with the paperless workflow, and sort of, and I'll go through the individual pieces of this and sort of showing off the different details. But this is what we're trying to transfer, what Central Georgia was transferring that old workflow from into this new modern paperless workflow. I think it's important to note, and it's why these are on here, that this process is still work management driven. This process is still requirement managed. These two things don't change, whether you are a paperless process or a physical process. Again, what the work is, the quality with which it needs to get done doesn't change, and it's important that it doesn't change, because if you change that, then you're devaluing the work, you're doing yourself a disservice in the long run. So as much as you want to change your process when you're working on these things, you need to make sure that the core of what you do, the accuracy, that thing which is important, isn't compromised in the process. So that was, again, those are the first two things, and I think they need to be high priority as far as the way when you're looking at every time you change one of these processes, you need to make sure that you're not compromising the quality and the essential part of the work that you need to do every day. That said, once you have gotten those things and those things have been taken care of, the ability to change the rest of this is enlightening. It could change your whole process. It really can change the way you do things and just make it a lot less work in the end. Although you will do a lot of work to set the process up, the day-to-day activity, you truly can cut your work in half or even better. And I'll show you sort of several of these steps that Central Georgia has put in place. First, digital staking sheets. You got to start getting that piece of paper out of their hand, just being able to pass that all back digitally. And again, I'll go through a lot of these in the various slides and describe sort of the benefits each of them. As-built documents at each location. Now, this could be done a couple different ways, particularly in the case because of the photos and because of the amount of details that Central Georgia puts on an individual location. They actually did this documentation through every individual location through FieldPro, through our Futura's inspection project. And that allowed you to all of a sudden take all that, and also allowed you to pull the data from the background map into that inspection and bring that up as far as the as-built stuff. Direct transfer the data. Again, every time that you transfer that data through paper, through those little red line marks, through something that isn't a direct move of that data, you risk accuracy of that data. The goal here, ultimately, from my perspective, and again, I'm a little biased being from a GIS company, but I mean, that GIS is very important. You want to make that as accurate as possible. So the more direct you can have that field communications come back from the field and enter that data, as directly as possible, the less chances there are for that data to be corrupted, mistyped, any of those different things, misread on a piece of paper because of legibility, all that stuff does. And then again, we also talked about the picture inventory. This is something that may not be specific to you, but even if you're only taking a single picture, again, this is a valuable data. People, when they see that picture, if it's out of date, it's not current, then they're not going to trust that data. And having them trust that data that you have the GIS for the next person that's looking at this data in the future, again, making that as accurate as possible. There are also some advantages as far as the actual process itself. A digital environment makes it much easier to move those things to multiple departments. It's not that you couldn't make 8 copies of that same stack and hand them all out, but then you have a process of combining that back in the end and having that logistics go. So digitally being able to pass that away, again, it's the same way as far as having a conversation. You're trying to get 4 or 5 people together for a meeting to have a conversation, even like the one we're doing now, obviously takes some time and logistics. Sending an email out where everybody has a digital copy and you can have a digital email description is pretty trivial. So being able to have that, having multiple departments work on that makes it a lot easier from that direction. Indigo reporting. Indigo is our sort of our back of the office work management solution. So this allows you, but it also has a powerful reporting engine. I'll show you a couple, describe this a little further in the presentation, but we've got it written into Report IQ, which is a product that's based on the Tableau. So now that you've got all this data here, we're taking a lot of time in this process protecting that data, making sure it is as streamlined and efficient as possible. Well, now, now we're beginning to live in the world of data analytics. Well, now what can we learn from that data going forward? That first, the graph I showed you with the staking sheets is exactly an example of this. Let's look at the process. What months do we have more staking, whatever. So now that you're collecting this, that it's not just scanned documents and all that data is digital. It's all available in a work management system. It's all available for some reporting to really sort of look at that next step. So automatic imaging, this is just practical. You don't have to take those 8 billion pieces of paper, put them in a copy machine and scan them because they're already digital. So all you have to do is assign them to the automated digitaling file. And then pre-job briefing performed in Field Pro. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. This was an essential part of creating this as a paperless process, but actually turned out to be sort of an extra benefit as far as that process went. So in one that I think Central Georgia and myself were also surprised by how something that seemed to be very, one little block in the grand scheme of the workflow, all of a sudden by changing it digitally really did have a lot of other benefits that we didn't expect. So this is an example of that new workflow. And as you can say, it's still, it still is linear in a lot of ways, but you can see as you get towards the end of the workflow, it really does allow you to break it out, to pass this thing onto multiple people so they can be working on these little things. And so they're not held up just because this stack of paper is at one particular place. They're not held up and restricted by moving their piece of the project further. So in addition, there were some other benefits that were additional benefits from going paperless. Improved as-built accuracy. The data collected is as accurate as possible. That has a lot to do with the digital environment. Allows you to data copy instead of making assumptions from what's in the GIS and what you already have that. It allows you to use things like pick lists. So again, consistency of the data that's being returned to you. All those things, again, all about protecting that GIS and really getting that data that is the permanent record, of your utility plant to be as accurate as possible. Also, very real time. One of the problems of the paper solutions is it just takes time to get back to the office, especially if you're talking about moving those photos back and forth, passing SD cards and all those different pieces. That can be a very logistical lag as far as when that data is getting to your GIS, when that data is available to the things. So having that real-time data collection, having that directly from the field, and having that digital process be able to hand it back as quickly as possible, obviously is going to allow you to access that data and just speed up that entire circle of how you're moving that data in your utility. So now you've got new data, now you can act on that new data, now you can perform more actions, again, more quickly get back to your GIS and so on and so forth. Part of that also is, of course, immediately GIS posting capabilities. If you're making that data editable, you've got that in digital format, you can immediately pull that data back into the GIS through a variety of different ways. And removing the paper reliance problem. Paper is, for lack of a better term, risky. It could be lost, it can get coffee spilled on it, it could be destroyed in the field because of rain or any number of other environmental factors. It's good for what it is. We do the very best for what it is, but it is a risky proposition. It is not as stable as something that's being collected digitally, has automatic backup, has all that information as quickly as possible. That just, again, it's going to solve a lot of those problems by removing that reliance on paper. And lastly is positive environmental impacts. And the obvious one here is obviously if we're using less paper, again, we're saving trees and all that. And that of course was certainly, something to be considered when you look at going paperless. But actually the biggest one of these turned out to be the after COVID came about, what the effects for that is. One of the interesting, effects of this is being able to do that more remotely, being able to push those jobs, those forms out to somebody at their home if they're not working in the office. Originally, when you talked about this paper process, the minimum number of people that would have put their hands on that physical pack for staking was 16. Every one of those contacts is an opportunity to pass that again, to have that contact, to pass COVID on. This eliminates all those. Again, I mean, and I understand that as a temporary problem, but I mean, there's a lot of other advantages, but it was just sort of an added benefit as far as, you know, not environments as far as environmental, but more as in the environment that these are passed around in and how it really does. But more importantly, how it allows you to pass people out. If people, you know, if they're working from home and they're closer to the construction site, they're closer to everything they need, why would they, you know, drive an hour into the office just to get this pack of paper to take it back out, when instead it could all show up on their iPad at their place of work and they could go directly to the work site. So these are some of the tools that, I mean, the primary tools that actually were set up then. So Futura Stake to CIS integration is basically passing that information, you know, between the staking and the accounting system, having all that data about the location, service address, all those different pieces. The pre-job briefing documentation is actually that moment, you know, again, preparing the safety meeting beforehand. Inspection forms to collect the post-data construction data. That's, again, I'll show, I'm going to show you the majority of these first four actually in actual individual slides and sort of talk about them directly. And then iOS device support importing allows you to work on this PDF, which is about the redlining piece. The two that I'm not actually going to show later in the presentation, so I did want to address here, is the GIS propose layer. That is just allowing you to basically, we're bringing those jobs in. They now are in the GIS. So even before construction, even, you know, they are still represented there. So some of these other jobs can be, if you want to see that on the PDF or you want to see or interact it from inspections, you can interact with these points even though they're not officially built points in the GIS, because obviously if you're going to be doing a post-construction data, that doesn't mean that pole is actually at that point in the GIS, but you still need to be able to inspect and work on that pole. And the last one of these is the Futura Indigo to GIS integration. And that is, like I say, Indigo is sort of our office, our database management. It's sort of where all that data is collected, but it's web-based. So it allows you to look at all that data, manage it, sort it, all the things that you could do in a very powerful spreadsheet tool, you know, to data management tool, but not actually be a GIS person. So this allows a lot more people to sort of get into it, get into the data. I mean, the GIS people should live in the GIS world, but there are a lot of other people that just want to see the data. They want to see, you know, well, what happened with these polls on this date with this particular characteristic? And Futura Indigo allows a lot more people to access that, to also move the process along. So if they can say, hey, I've reviewed this, and now, you know, I'm going to check this box yes, so they can populate that data in that form except from the office. So that allows a lot more people to work on the process and you know, make that paperless, where a lot of the stuff I am going to show you has a lot to do with what Central Georgia did to make it paperless in the field. The Futura Indigo GIS integration and all that piece really, you know, complemented that in the office to make that process as paperless as possible, because anything you can do with an inspection form in the field or whatever can be done in Indigo as well. All right, let's actually sort of get to what actually was done. So a lot of that was sort of the planning and the theoretical, but let's actually, you know, get down to the nitty gritty. So this is the first one of these, data population of the CIS and Futura Stake. Worth bringing up here, I mean, I wanted to definitely point it out, but this is, again, allowing you to take all that data that is collected that, you know, you're storing, if your two, you know, accounts of record are your GIS and your CIS, then melding that together. So staking is going to take the best of both worlds. You know, location, service address, all those different things that you're going to need to have that information to populate what usually is called the header fields of the job. Again, I mean, I think we do it very well as far as that bond goes, but any staking system is going to have these two pieces of data and really collect them. So this is something that's pretty standard, but again, without that data there, a lot of these other pieces of the process aren't really able to be achieved. Pre-job briefing. So I'm going to stick on this one a little bit longer because, like I had mentioned before, this was sort of a surprise. So when talking to Central Georgia, this was one of those periods where, okay, you've gotten out there, you've created digital, But, this was a form that had to be filled out, for legal reasons, to have that safety briefing, to really get into that, to create a paperless process. This was a barrier. It was like, without this piece solved, then maybe you could have, maybe we've managed to solve the staking sheet problem and all the other ones, but this moment in time has to be recorded. And again, typically it had been recorded by paper, where you would go through a checklist and mark off all the different things, make sure you've mentioned all the things, talk about all the employees that were present, so on and so forth. But after a discussion with Central Georgia, we realized that you have the ultimate tool for that right in your hand, because all this paperless process is dependent on an iPad. So why go through all those things on paper when you could be quickly checking those, picking the employees present from that? And one of the benefits of that was you could be taking a picture. So this is an example of an actual picture. So the person that's holding the iPad, obviously they have a digital record that they're logged onto the iPad. So we know they were present. But now we have a picture of actually who was present. So this is not a theoretical, like, well, these are the people that were on that crew that day, supposedly. Like, this is who was physically here at the job. And so this can be put in all these drop downs in the photo documentation, but it's also searchable. Central Georgia Plus chose to link all these to the substation. So if you wanted to go back to the substation and see every project that was worked on that substation, or if I wanted to know, well, hey, was Bob at this particular job? I mean, it's not a, well, of course he was on crew 2, and then he was assigned to crew 2 that day. I could look at the photo and be like, well, he's there in the photo. And we know the person that's taking the photo, so we know all these people actively, were part of this process. Another added benefit of this that I didn't consider, but Central Georgia really did, this also allows you to record the actual site. So for instance, they will take pictures of tracks that are already there from perhaps other vehicles that have done damage to the site, or cracks in the sidewalk, to record that, look, this is before we started work. We did not do these. Here's a digital photo record of everything that was happened here as part of this pre-job briefing. So these are all things. So if that owner later comes back and goes, well, your trucks did this, or your crew did this, be like, no, I have a photo here that is timestamped and recorded, and part of our pre-job briefing that proves that this is exactly what we did. This is exactly the way we did it. So to me, this is an added benefit. It was important to move for a paperless process, to move this step beyond, to paperless, but actually by moving it to paperless, there were also all these unseen benefits, that this is now not only a duplication of that paper record, it's actually a much better version of that record, and has a lot of things. And in truth, I don't know we've even, figured out all the different uses that these photos and this information could, is going to add to that process. But again, I'm personally, I will say I was really excited to talk about this one, because to me it was like, it was that +1 that said, well, yes, we solved the problem, but wow, we really solved 4 other problems that we never even knew that Central Georgia was going to be able to solve in that process. All right, now we look at the data collection. So this is actually what you're seeing here is a screenshot of Futura Field Pro. And actually what you're seeing there, and the reason that line is not the same as the blue one above it, is because this is what I was talking about as a proposed job. So this job has been put to the cycle. It is in Futura Stake. It is there where you can be inspected and interacted with, but it actually hasn't been applied directly to the GIS, because it actually hasn't been constructed. At this point, you'd be doing post-constructed, so it would be constructed, but it hadn't yet been added to the GIS as far as that goes. And what Central Georgia decided to do is basically create 3 different types of inspections for all the different locations in that construction process. And those would be the consumer, and the overhead, and underground. And I'm going to show you each one of those real quickly. So you can see this is a consumer post-construction. This is turns out to be almost the summary. I mean, although it does have to do with specifically with all the consumer data that is auto-populated from the GIS and the staking sheet in the background. So that's all already filled out here. But if you needed to make any notes for map number or anything that's changed, it allows you to document a lot of the new construction, but it's also for the header field. So for instance, if there's some reason some field here that's populated from the CIS is incorrect, you're out there and they tell you that the phone number is a different phone number for this particular gun. You can put that in, that can all be brought back over and update. everything. It also allows you to do specific ones about that. Like, maybe you need the meter number. You can read that off the meter, put that directly in here. Again, this is going to give you all the data for that consumer, but also for the job as a whole, since the job is ultimately associated with this consumer. And then underground, every one of the underground, again, same concept. What you're doing, what you see here are forms that are being pulled up on Futura Field Pro, which is the basically the field app for staking and inspection. So these are inspection forms. Again, we are populating as much as we can from the background map, from the job, from the GIS, because the more of that data that is done automatically is the less chances for that data to be overridden incorrectly. But it's also to give that person that information. Is this correct? Are the materials correct? Are the different pieces? Sorry, this is overhead. I just jumped to the wrong one. But overhead, has to do with again, joint use, but same thing. Is that pole correct? All those different pieces. Is there anything up there, any joint use fields that need to be attached up there? Does this need to be, again, engines notification is a national joint use thing. Was there something that was done here that needs to be notified to them? It can check a box. And then you can see those boxes at the bottom of that picture. And then somebody in Indigo can say, show me all the jobs that need engines notifications. It's going to sort them, and then they can resolve that part of the process. And then, so this allows you to, get that checklist that you would have with paper, but it's also dynamic. If you don't have any engines notifications, all those fields will automatically hide in this document. So just by unchecking that box and saying, nope, I don't have to deal with that, you've now reduced that thing. You've gotten that checklist to be better instead of, going through all these check boxes. Think of like when you're in the doctor's office and there's like, well, these 4 sections I don't even have to fill out because they're not relative to me. How much nicer would it be for those 4 sections just to disappear, and then you don't have to worry about them because they're not relevant to your specific case. And then this would be the underground. Again, same concept. You can see a lot of these are the same things. In this case, obviously, you're going to be doing a lot more maybe new attribute fields like the transformer manufacturer, fault indicator dates, any of that data that's about the new equipment that you've put out here in the field, making sure that is all there. But ultimately, again, the main value of that is bringing the data from the background to populate as much as possible, and then combining that with your current I'm standing right there observation of what actually happened and getting that data. So you're getting as accurate data as possible to go back into the office from where it is. And then this was again another benefit that I would love, of course, from Futura's perspective to take credit from, but actually I have to get the credit to iOS here. One of the most recent versions of iOS added a redlining or a PDF editing tool natively to iOS. So what Central Georgia did is basically they're shipping these staking sheets out as a PDF. And if there still are a need, those other forms don't cover it. And sometimes there's a graphical view, something that just has to be seen on the map. Those can be noted. You can make notes, you can redline on that, you can save that, you can send that PDF back, things. And the advantage of that is there's no imaging hardware now. Now you don't have to scan that in on the other side as far as putting that. There was no additional hardware or software to be put on the iPad. Again, iOS has that natively as far as just being able to edit that PDF. So just by moving that thing and then also passing that on, again, like I spoke of, that person that's out in the field, that's at home, especially in the current environment, doesn't have to go back and get that physical thing because he's got a staking sheet that is just as good as paper, if not better. And he can write on it just like he could with paper with the same red colored pen, quote unquote, and make those notes. So if they're not going to be satisfied by those previous 3 inspections that I showed, then he can go directly to the thing just like he used to and make those notes and certainly, get that. And again, this then not only is it cleaner than that last one that you saw that had everything marked up, which is nice, but now we also have a perfect digital representation. Doesn't matter, the paper wasn't going to get damaged. We don't have to scan in what the version that went out in the field and had all those things that happened in the field to it. You've got a nice, crisp, clean, brand new PDF. We've also got the old PDF as well, so you're not scanning in an old copy. Well, this is the one we sent out with no marks, and then this is the one with marks. Easily attach those 2 digital files, and you've got that set up accordingly. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out is this is back to one of the other things that I mentioned is like the report IQ, having that reporting. Now that we have all this data digitally, instead of just scanned in or written on paper or marked up, you can now do any of these different things. I mean, you can take that data and you can do contractor invoicing. So you can break all that out very easily instead of somebody having to look at those sheets and look for the right notes and find those out. That can all be done in Indigo. Just like somebody could mark it. Does this need contractor invoicing? What needs done? Now all that data is, again, with one report tells you exactly what needs to do that. Same with the engine's ticket status. You can track all that digitally as well. Again, all the fault indicator manufacture dates, you've now got all that digitally in your thing. So if you needed to do any search on that later, you're getting that both into your workflow process, but ultimately also into your GIS. So you've got all that. And so, and again, done with changes, all the consumer equipment, you've got all that different pieces, again, right there at your fingertips, making it as easy as possible. Just, again, any barrier you can get that keeps the person that needs it away from the data. And again, paper is unfortunately the ultimate barrier to that. So the more we can remove of that, the more that process goes forward. And that is, again, a very, and I cannot overemphasize how big picture that view of it is. I tried to give you a taste of all the different big pieces of that, but obviously it is a very in-depth process, and there's a lot of work to be done there. So I would like to say this is my contact information if you're interested, but I would like to say a huge thank you to Blake Holmes of Central Georgia. He is the brains and the brawn and everything that is behind this project. Certainly, I appreciate that we got to be a tool involved in this, and that I got to be involved in it personally, because being a person who has really been in field solutions for wow, over 13 years at this point, it's really excited, and this is the dream world that I've always wanted to be in, which was the paperless world, and to see it actually in practice, I mean, that really is a tribute to Central Georgia and Blake and what he did. But again, I do, that's why I love to show this off and really get a chance for y'all to get to this. I also really briefly want to plug one of, as my other things, I am also the chairman of the IEEE Rural Electric Power Conference this year. And we'll be doing a virtual conference April 27th and through 29th. It'll also offer professional units or CEUs. We'll be doing 12 people will be presenting the papers that unfortunately they didn't get to present last year, but they'll be able to present those as well. It is free. If you go to IEEE-REPC.org, you can sign up. There's no cost. We would love to have y'all if y'all are in this. Certainly if you're engineers or just interested in sort of that true in-depth engineering, but very much from a cooperative perspective. These are people that are not just, not just doing electrical engineering work, but are really, doing it through the frame that all of us are really looking through it. And that's it. I hope I didn't go too fast and I got the point across, but I'd be happy to take questions now if you have them.
All right, thanks, David. We do have a few questions for you. The first one being, Central Georgia was using SEDC accounting, but could this work with other accounting solutions?
Yes, I mean, we, from the Futura perspective, I mean, so two answers to that question. Yes, this particular process, Futura is, we work with, I mean, NISC, we can work with a variety of different, SEDC, a variety of different accounting companies. That said, not that I should put this hat on, but from an educational perspective, I mean, this is doable with the solution you have. Obviously, I think what, Blake at Central Georgia did with Futura is truly amazing. I think we were the right tool from the job, but obviously, logo on my shirt, I'm biased as far as that opinion goes. But yes, I mean, I think you can do it with a variety of different accounting systems. We certainly could work with those accounting systems, but ultimately, it's about really working on the process.
Thanks. The next one is, what do you think the biggest hurdle for Central Georgia was in getting the process implemented?
Planning. I think, I mean, ultimately, as much as we think of things being the technology or the different pieces, but it's really looking, I mean, you saw how complicated the workflow is, how to move that through. It really is about sitting down with all the stakeholders and really talking about, like, what do you do day to day? Like, building those workflows, as much as they are tedious and time consuming, those workflow charts are important, because you have to make sure, you know, if you're going to go paperless, you can't miss a step. I mean, and luckily you don't miss a step. That's what brings about some things like the, you know, the pre-planning, you know, the pre-job meeting, you know, some things by not missing a step, you really do find a, you know, a diamond in the rough per se.
Thanks, David. The last question that we have, what do you think the biggest surprise was during this process?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't, the pre-job thing. I mean, again, I'm so excited about the advantage of taking a picture and replacing a signature, you know, from all those people where you can't read those signatures anyway. I mean, people just hand scratch it real quickly on there. So I mean, anybody could have attended that meeting, but having a digital record, having a true view of what is out there and how that goes, yeah, to me, that to me was really excited. I would love to actually ask Blake that question. He may have a different opinion. Perhaps I'm a little biased just because I think that's particularly cool. But that I think was an added benefit that Central Georgia really didn't see, how much that really would change the process and how much it could really continue to change the process, just because it's that picture changes the method of recording, which really makes things different.
Thank you so much for that, David. Again, just as a reminder, if you do have any questions, please submit those through the chat function to AIEC. In the meantime, we wanted to remind you of our CTC conference. The Cooperative Technology Conference will be taking place October 13th through 15th. That's going to be located at the Marriott Bloomington Normal. We will have more coming on that soon, so be excited to get back in person and do that. Also, just be on the lookout for a survey coming from me within the next week. That will be, if you complete that, you will be entered into the grand prize drawing for a $100 Amazon gift card. We do also have an archive page for all previous presentations. The ones that are from today as well will be on that page. It's at aiec.coop/webinar weeks archive. The next presentation we have coming is at 1 o'clock. That is an SEDC presentation, Beneficial Analytics. Where can your data really help you stop losses in both expenses and efficiency? Registration will remain open for that until noon. However, if you do miss that deadline, please feel free to reach out to me and I will get you that information for the Zoom call. There are no other questions in the chat function, David, so thank you so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it. Again, David's contact information is there on the screen. If you have any questions for him and aren't able to get a hold of him, please feel free to reach out to myself, Brian, or Dan Gerard. We'll be more than happy to put you in touch with David.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you back here at 1 o'clock.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.